This Future Construct podcast episode is supported by Applied Software. Applied Software is on a mission to transform industry by empowering their clients and championing innovation with real-world expert consultants. So visit asti.com, it's ASTI.com, and please let them know that we here at Future Construct and BIM Designs sent you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Future Construct. I am your host, Amy Peck. Today we have Ryan Denehy as our guest, who is the founder and CEO of Electric. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me, Amy. It's great to be here.
So let's dive right in. We're going to get to some very exciting recent successes at the company, but how did you come to start Electric AI? I mean, what was interesting about this world of IT for you?
Well, it started by me playing the role of the de facto IT guy at my previous two startups, which is not anything I have any formal training in. It was not something I had any desire to actually be doing. My first business was an online ad network that I started out of my college dorm room in 2007, which was acquired by USA Today on New Year's Day, 2008. And so, we were a small company, 10, 12 people, and I was the one person who was sort of gifted with the responsibility of making sure people had their laptops and software and all that good stuff. And then my second company, which was a retail analytics business, which I started in 2012, we grew to about 40 employees there. And, there was a weekend where I was with my head of operations, and we were setting up a bunch of Lenovo laptops for our sales team. And I was like, this is such a bad use of my time as the co-founder of this company to be here on a weekend, like setting up laptops. Like, the employees are going to hate me because they're not going to be set up right. I hate myself because I'm not actually doing things to grow the business. And it was funny because we were, that company was based in San Francisco. And this was, I think, around 2013. I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'm in San Francisco. I'm in the sort of epicenter of technology, and there's no modern IT solution. Like, there aren't 10 venture-backed companies like trying to solve this. Every IT solution on the market back then was designed for corporate IT departments, but there was nothing for companies that didn't have an IT department. And I remember looking at our finance department, and like, they had some really neat modern tools. Like, we were an early customer of Expensify, and I'm like, okay, well, before Expensify, you just had like a shoebox full of receipts and an intern like uploading them into the expense software. Now you have Expensify, and like, you don't need any of that stuff. Or I looked at our HR department, which was one person doing HR 50% of the time, and I'm like, the whole reason that we can have one person spending only half their time on it is because we were using Zenefits, and like, Zenefits had essentially automated a lot of the work that would go into payroll and benefits. And then I'm sitting there with a stack of laptops going like, okay, stop everything. Like, how does, the Zenefits or Expensify, how does that not exist for IT yet? And so, I'd had that idea in the back of my head for a while. I was like, I thought every good idea for a software company was taken until I kind of like had that epiphany. However, I had my retail analytics business to run. And so my fear was that by the time I exited that business and could actually start Electric, that there were going to be 10 other companies doing it. Fortunately, we got a phenomenal offer to sell the analytics business to Groupon at the end of 2014, spent about a year there. And by the time I left, no one had started this company yet. So I moved to New York, and Electric was born.
That is amazing. I love that. Is like true entrepreneurship, where you're like, you haven't even, and it's your second company, you haven't even sold your second company yet, and you already like, okay, this will be company number 3. I love that.
Yeah,
it's a little exhausting.
Like, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that's just like the entrepreneur's mindset, is you just start looking at I think it makes it annoying. Like entrepreneurs are annoying people to be around because it's like, hey, can we just like use a product or go to a store or just observe anything without you thinking about like a better way to do it or market it or sell it?
No, but this is what we need. We need, I like to call it volumetric thinking. It's people who look at things and they sort of connect these disparate dots, and they can, kind of put, coalesce some sort of a plan or a path or a better way, which, it is, you mentioned something that I think is really interesting, which is that it doesn't exist. And you were in the belly of the beast in San Francisco, where you would think that this was such an obvious, a product, really. And, what do you think are some of the ways that, even mid-sized companies can look at, how to grow, or how to, I hate to use the word pivot because it just, to me, it's just got such a negative connotation, but I think every company has to consistently be looking at, market factors and needs and the way that business needs are changing, and be limber enough to flow with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is not going to be a particularly insightful point of view, but sort of the adage of like skate to where the puck is going has never been more applicable. And the reality is there is a ton of great macroeconomic research out there. And so if you are lucky enough to have some kind of domain expertise in a specific vertical, and you just spend enough time kind of like reading the tea leaves of like, where's the wind blowing, right? Like what do consumers want? What do businesses want? How are things changing? I think you can start to sort of surmise like a better way of doing, of doing something. And I think a great example of this in the public markets, for example, would be a company like ServiceNow. ServiceNow, under the leadership of their previous CEO, John Donahoe, he was a consumer guy. He'd been at PayPal before, and his view was enterprises are going to buy and use more software. Software is going to be the underpinning of how employees work, and so therefore we need to build our software to make it easier for all the employees at those companies to work. And separately, the people who buy our products are increasingly using more and more technology at home, and they want their technology at work to be as easy to use as their technology at home, right? Now, like, these are like kind of obvious things when you hear someone say that. You're like, yeah, you want software to be easy to use, and you want the software that your employees use to like make their lives easier. But through the lens of a corporate IT department, like, that was insane. That's not how people thought about those things, but it's how he thought about it. Now ServiceNow is a 60 or $80 billion, market cap company. And it was just because a guy like John sort of took a step back and said, like, well, like, what do people care about? What do people want? And I think it looks very easy when it's done well, right? Like, good business decisions look inevitable when they're executed. You're like, obviously, like, how else would you do it? But I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in the day-to-day of managing your business and trying to like come up with incremental improvements to the way you're currently doing things. It's much harder to step out of the day-to-day and say, well, I guess we're even doing the right things, or do we even care about the right things for this business?
Yeah, but I think that actually what you're saying is, there is that path of how do we make the incremental changes. But I do think it's increasingly important to actually step back and have that bird's eye view about kind of where things are going. And so, without giving away, your next company, what are some of those trends? Where is the puck going in a lot of the businesses that we're all thinking about? Let's take my love and passion, which is, like, let's say, immersive technology. Do you see some opportunities there?
Well, describe what you mean for myself and the audience around immersive technology.
Well, so AR, VR, and then now the sort of recent, overhyped term of the metaverse.
Yeah, well, okay. So the biggest thing, and this is coming from someone who started a company in what was a very hyped space 5 years ago, right? So 5 years ago, anything with the word AI in it, people freaked out about. And the reality is, AI on its own is irrelevant, like in the same way that like AR is really irrelevant in theory, right? Or like crypto is kind of irrelevant on its own. What actually matters is, what's the problem you're trying to solve, and how are we harnessing new technology to solve it in a better way, right? And so, I think any business needs to be looking at what the value prop is for their customer and saying, is there a new emerging, or evolving technology that can, that can essentially help us do that better? A great example would be, I haven't spent a lot of time in a Tesla, but I was in Texas last week with down at one of our offices down there. One of the guys who works for us has brand new, Tesla Model 3. I get in there and he's showing off the self-driving mode. And I looked at that and said, like, that's the first time I've been super impressed by technology in a long time. And what was interesting about it is it wasn't trying to take over the whole driving experience. It simply, made the act of driving more convenient and safer through the use of really sophisticated technology. But like when you go buy a Tesla, they're not promoting computer vision and LiDAR, because the average consumer doesn't care about computer vision and LiDAR. They care that they can actually, like, they can text their friends while they're sitting in traffic and, like, not risk getting in an accident. So sort of a long way of saying, like, there's so much cool enabling technology out there, but what I've tried to do with electric, and what I think more thoughtful CEOs are trying to do, is not get too enamored with the technology itself. Just stay focused on the problem that technology is going to help you solve.
Yeah, that's great advice, I think. But we are going to take a super fast break now and hear from our sponsors, but we will be back momentarily. This episode of the Future Construct podcast is supported by the amazing team at Applied Software. They have solutions for any modern project. Applied Software is on a mission to transform industry by empowering their clients and being the champions of innovation with their real-world expert consultants. They have a comprehensive suite of solutions for AEC, MEP, and manufacturing, and they have a singular focus to help you achieve higher performance. They have software, training, support, consulting, and custom development. Applied Software has you absolutely covered for all of your workflow needs. And BIM Designs is proud to be a client and partner of Applied Software. So visit ASTI.com, that is ASTI.com, and please let them know that Future Construct and BIM Designs sent you. And we are back with Ryan Denehy from Electric. So we have a pretty broad audience in the AEC realm, and really curious how some of the challenges that you're seeing in that industry around IT concerns, and some of the ways that you're able to help solve that.
Yeah, well, I first got turned on to this industry because we share investors with a company called Procore, and they build a modern software stack for a lot of different types of businesses of all shapes and sizes, in the construction space. And so, what we realized is, a lot of these businesses really support the foundation of what the country is built on. So it's a huge market, it's an extremely important market, but separately, the challenges are somewhat unique when you compare them to a regular business that has employees who, either show up to an office or just sit in their house all day. When you start to think about field workforces, right, you start to think about, large numbers of variable workforces. So, hey, you've got a bunch of people showing up to, different sites in different places, and it's not necessarily the same people every day. And you've got some people bringing devices, bringing their own devices from home, other, devices that are owned by the company. And, those things also have to be, monitored and managed, and they're going to be experiencing a wide range of, environmental factors. And it takes all the challenges of a traditional office and just cranks it up to 11. And so I think, for us, building software that can help companies manage their software and their devices in a more effective way, but in a wide range of different conditions. I think that's what a company like ours, which is really building software to automate a lot of what a human would do, I think we're better equipped than like the traditional local service provider. So, for us, we see it as a huge market, an important market, and a really exciting challenge to go solve.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, because there are pieces of it that just require so much human interaction and human input. And I think, on the global issue of being concerned about how automation will take jobs, it's just, I think it's just going to shift the focus of jobs, and it's going to open up a new realm of other opportunities for, for the next generation of workers. At least that's the hope.
Totally agree.
So I'd like to pull apart something that you did, and that I feel like is a through line for you, that you didn't necessarily talk specifically about, but in everything that you're describing, you're thinking about the end user and sort of the human factors and how to make people's lives better, which I think is also gets lost sometimes in this world of, the plethora of technologies that are available to us. So I'd love to hear how that has or has not been kind of a guiding principle for you in some of your journeys.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing is I'm not a technical person. I'm not even particularly good at math, right? And so I don't necessarily view the world as an engineering problem. I view the world as a ease of use problem for the most part. And if we take a much bigger step back, the very first business I actually started was a video production company. So my background at the very beginning of my career was in video production and graphic design. So like I'm much more of a sort of creative type than I am, anything resembling, technical or analytical, which I think ultimately has helped me build this company, but also build the two companies that came before it, all through the lens of like, we just have to build stuff that works and makes people's lives easier. We obviously have to have a business model that is compelling to go along with it. And we obviously have to have the means to deliver the offering, in the way that we want to. But, back in 2016, when I started Electric, there was this wave of companies that were basically trying to build AI tools, but they were largely founded by these technical founders who were so enamored with their ability to build AI technology and didn't for a second actually think about the commercial application, right? And so, without naming any names, there was a company that used AI to, schedule appointments on your calendar. There was a company that used AI to, answer questions for, your HR department. And at no point did anybody take a step back and go, isn't that a solved problem? Like, can't I just use Calendly with no AI and schedule my appointments more easily? Or wouldn't a simple knowledge base suffice for, answering HR questions for my team? And so, unfortunately, a lot of those companies aren't around anymore. They had very underwhelming exits because the focus was on how neat the technology was and not on what it actually accomplished, for the end user. And so, when you look at the venture market today, and the fact that there's never been an, easier time to raise capital, for what it's worth, it's still very hard to raise capital. It's just less hard, than it was before. But a lot of companies are getting funded and they're going off and they're tinkering and they're building things. And like, that's all well and good. But I do think there's a subset of those companies that are just getting way too lost on the novelty of the technology, not focused enough on the benefit for the user.
So, and you've had, speaking of fundraising, you speak from experience. I think you have a little bit of exciting news to share.
Yeah, so we just raised our Series D. It was a $90 million round, which brings our total amount raised since we started in 2016 to $190 million. Which gives me a little bit of anxiety, but on the other hand, it's all going to a good place. We are trying to build a company that is going to be the market leader for a very long time. We want to build a business that will be a sort of long-standing and eventually publicly traded company. And I couldn't be happier that our investors, see what I see in the business, see what our leadership team sees in the business, and we're able to step up and give us the resources to keep our foot on the gas.
That is really, really exciting. Congratulations.
Thanks.
So let's go back to again, kind of the personal journey. You were, in San Francisco and you decided to move to New York. And, what was some of the impetus for that? Was it, you thought it was a better place for the company, or was it more of a personal decision, or just a change? It was time for a change.
Well, both. My now wife was living in New York. So that was
That makes it easier to live in the
yeah,
same
and
city.
I grew up on the East Coast, but honestly, there was a really exciting thing that was happening in 2015, 2016, which was there was this renaissance of new startups being born in New York. And they were companies that weren't afraid to tackle hard problems, unsexy problems. Really close friend of mine at the time had started a company called Managed by Q. And what they were doing was sort of building the modern operating system for the office. And so they basically, they had, they would send an army of people out into the city at night to clean 2,000 offices. It was effectively a janitorial service with software overlaid on top of the whole thing. And then over time, their plan was to sort of, automate the whole stack of everything that went into office management. And like, that's one example of the type of company that was getting started in New York back then. And, I remember looking at that going like, no one in San Francisco would ever start a company like that, right? Like it was operationally complex. It was in a space that was really, I think, uninteresting for a lot of people. It was a hard problem in ways that technology on its own couldn't solve. And I thought, wow, there's a breed of entrepreneur in New York that is just going after stuff that's really interesting, and that's the place that I want to be. So that was the other motivation for building the company there, and it worked out really well. I had a really good group of other founders solving hard problems that were off the beaten path, to get advice from in the early days.
And then, so how has, the situation that we're hopefully at the tail end of, how did that impact, that kind of fell squarely sort of in the middle of your, growth cycle. Was that impactful in a positive way, negative way, neutral?
Well, like with most companies, short-term, negative a little bit, right? In the sense that, we had for a few months, we had a number of customers who had to lay people off. We had a couple of months where new sales were very hard to come by. And then like many other software companies, immediately it turned from, worst sales month in a year to best sales month ever. Right. And then fortunately, a lot of our customers who, had to lay people off within 6 months started rehiring everybody back and then some. And I could never have predicted that we would be in the midst of the type of economic cycle that we're seeing, and never could have predicted that this shift to remote and hybrid work was going to force every business owner and leader of frankly any size of company to really rethink their it sounds corny, sort of digital transformation strategy, right? But I think it gave people an opportunity to really look at the status quo and how you were doing things and reassess, is this the best bang for the buck with this particular vendor, this particular provider? Is the way we've been doing this thing historically, does that still make sense in the world, for the world we're living in now? For our company, which provides a modern remote first IT solution, you can kind of guess how things have gone for us. Don't get me wrong, it's still hard, right? Like it's not like we have customers lining up, or writing into the website by the thousands. We still have to, get out there and get in front of people and educate people on what's happening. However, there's less friction, and the market's a little more sort of pre-educated to the benefits of what we're doing. And I think a lot of other software companies that fulfill a real need are seeing the same benefit.
Yeah, from an IT perspective, now you have, more than half the workforce in a lot of cases in some of these companies are now working from home. And it's sort of a different set of challenges to be able to access, IT on demand and be able to solve some of their challenges without having, an office to go to where there's a sort of centralized system to be able to handle some of their IT needs.
Yeah, I mean, the old way of doing things, particularly for the corner of the market that we go after, which is, generally companies who are large enough where IT is important, there's an IT budget, but too small to justify actually having an IT department. Historically, when everybody was working in offices every day, you'd go to one of the best in breed local providers. The problem is a lot of those local providers, and there are some great ones, but a lot of them, unfortunately, were dependent on showing up to the office a few days a week, They were dependent on the offering kind of being a black box because they didn't want to show their cards, and they kind of wanted to keep things to themselves. So you had a lot of dependency on, working with them. And so I think once you didn't have a critical mass of people showing up to the office anymore, a lot of questions were raised of, okay, so what are we really paying for? Or, is this really the best way to deliver, IT if we've got 80% of our, team is dispersed across the country? So, yeah, it's sort of been an obvious tailwind for us, but I think this style of work is gonna be somewhat permanent. So.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think people, businesses are certainly looking at the way they're doing things, but I think people are looking at, like, what do I really care about? So, I mean, so many people, you mentioned Texas, there was the Texodus from, particularly California, but also New York, people flocking to Austin, our show producer moving to Barbados. I think that people are like, wow, that now I can actually do this. So yeah, I think you're right there. So this kind of brings us to the last question. It's the same question I ask everyone every week, is if you could project yourself 20, 25 years in the future, besides, the next, 2 or 3 companies that you will have built by then, if you could bring with you any kind of gadget or service that would just make your life personally better or make you happy, what would it be and what would it do?
I think this is going to sound somewhat corny, but I think if I had a machine where I could press a button and it would cool the planet back to whatever the normal temperature was 100 years ago, I think that would probably be, totally selfishly speaking, like, the world will be a better place economically if you don't all of a sudden start having hurricanes and wildfires and all sorts of crazy environmental events where they have never previously happened. Again, speaking purely from an economic standpoint, like, it's just not good business to ruin the planet. And then obviously, sort of socially speaking, like, it would be nice to know that someday when I'm no longer on this planet, that it's like not going to turn into just a total messy fireball. So that would be my preference. If I can build such a machine, I'm sure someone's working on it somewhere, but like, that would be, I would sleep a little better at night if I could do that.
All right. Well, I don't think that that's selfish at all. And I kind of think that could be company number 4.
Yeah.
You got 20 years, so you got plenty of time.
But minimally, maybe I can find a way to desalinate water in the meantime in a cost-effective way.
That's a good start.
So that people can, listen, people in Palm Springs want their swimming pools and their golf courses, and someone's got to solve that problem for them.
Exactly. Priorities. It's all about priorities. Thank you so much for being with us today, Ryan. It was very, very insightful. Congratulations on the raise and continued success.
Thanks so much.